Hello, fellow human. November's gone. I participated in Nonfiction November. For the month, I completed 4 books, and I'm going to discuss them with you now. So like I said, I did participate in Nonfiction November. I made a little TBR at the beginning of the month. I think I outlined 5 books that I wanted to read. I did not read 2 of the books on that list, and I substituted for another one. But anyway, let's just jump into the books that I did complete this month. I started the month off with Mr. Bryson in A Walk in the Woods, which really did feel like that. This book is about Bill's journey through the Appalachian Trail, and he accomplished this back in the mid-90s. So yeah, like Bill Clinton was in office when he took this trip. And I wanted to read this because I do fantasize about going on a hike on the AT at some point, probably when I'm in my 40s. But at the moment, not a good time. But anyway, this is Bill's journey from going from Georgia and an attempt to go to Maine. But yeah, things change. You know, going with the flow. This is about his journey, and along with he had his companion, which Bill Cat. Is it Bill Cat? What's his name? Katz. Something Katz. He traveled with him on another walking tour in Europe, in another book, which I have not read. It's actually the first book I've ever read by Bill Bryson. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was entertaining and inspiring, and I would think, hey, they must have enhanced some of those, you know, those trails if it's been over 20 years since he's done it. So it was entertaining. Next book I completed was Gretchen Rubin's, what is this called? Outer Order, Inner Calm. The idea behind this is that if you organize your domicile, like if your living space and your workspace, then it'll help declutter your stress. I don't know, something like that. It's supposed to translate in that way. It doesn't, it's like a theory, and she doesn't, it's not scientific. This book has no like merit other than being a bullet list for ideas of cleaning up your physical space. And then it's basically a distilled version of the Marie Kondo's method, although she doesn't care for that, so not really. There isn't much to say about it other than I did come away with a couple ideas for cleaning methods, I guess, but they're more like so for example, I grow attached to some of my electronics, like my computer and cell phones, and her idea was to take a photo of those objects so that you can still have them, but you gotta release them, and whew, it's hard stuff. I gave the book 3 out of 5 stars. It's fine. It's a lot better than her happiness thing. It doesn't feel like she was forced to do a project and then force like people to read about her not wanting to do this project. But it also doesn't feel like it was something that she actually did. It's just idea collection, you know? Some of the ideas are fine, but okay. Next up, I ended up audiobooking this, which I do highly recommend. White Women, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color by Ruby Hamad. And this book is funny because she highlighted all of the top 5 books that people were put on their TBRs, or that they read for the month of November, the Nonfiction November. And the 2 books that were on there was Hood Feminism and Caste. And this book kind of feels like a combination between those 2 books with, I haven't read either of them, but like the general idea of those 2 books, it's kind of distilled into this book, which was formerly an essay that Hamad had written for Australian, was it the Huffington Post? And it casts some waves. This book actually highlights what happens in more of like a professional setting for how women of color are treated, and how it's on a surface level there's feminism, but then when white women become remotely offended by anything that a woman of color does, then she basically forces out the woman of color her own way, which is essentially another form of colonialism. And yeah, and the book actually goes into historical elements, but this is a very approachable text for getting information on this topic. I was drawn to this book because of the topic of women using their tears as defense mechanisms and turning themselves into victims. That came up in the book White Fragility, and I was curious about that because it wasn't something that I really knew about, and it's, you know, you gotta stay informed. So I popped into this book. Absolutely love this. Even if you're not a woman, a white woman, or even white men, everyone should be reading this book. It's really interesting, especially if you do work in an office. So go pick it up. And the last book, I was looking for something that I could listen to that was something about mental health, and I looked up Nellie Bly's book again and wanted to see if there was anything that was recommended that was similar, and it got Howard Dully's memoir called My Lobotomy, and which was very fascinating. This book highlights Howard's experience having to undergo a transorbital lobotomy at the age of, I think he was 12 or 14. In this book, he talks about his family history, but he also talks about, he doesn't really understand why it was that he ended up going through this procedure. And the aftermath of the procedure was worse than what led up to it. He ended up in mental institutions and in jail many a times over, and he didn't really get quite the education that he deserved, and he was treated differently, and he wanted to know, he felt like there was always something missing, and he wanted to know what the hell happened. So he actually ended up doing research later on in his life, and he got in touch with Dave Isay and Pia Kachar, and they worked with a company called Sound Portrait, and they work with NPR, and they ended up collaborating as a group where he was sent around the country to speak to people who were affected by lobotomies, and how they he interviewed these people. He even got to interview his father, and he wanted to know why precisely this happened to him, and it's heartbreaking. So I will warn you, if you decide to pick this up, there's a lot of child abuse involved in this book, and it's heartbreaking. His story is heartbreaking, but he's so hopeful, and he's such like a good example of a good person. Now, that NPR piece I will link down below. It doesn't even scratch the surface as to like the content of this book. However, this book does basically give you a play-by-play of this NPR piece, which is why, and there's like a lot of repeated information, and so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, but it's great. It's a wonderful piece, and I highly recommend it. The last book that I was planning to read was for the book club that I'm in, the Marauders book club, and that's The Stranger Beside Me by Annie Rule, and I wasn't feeling it. I was gonna read during on Thanksgiving weekend, and then I got the book. It's like this thick. I was like, I ended up not reading a damn thing the whole weekend and sleeping the entire weekend. I am still on a nonfiction kick, so I will be back here very soon discussing some of the books that I just recently finished, and also the fiction books that I completed last month. So until then, I will be seeing you around, I guess, in comments of other people's videos. And don't forget to give this the thumbs up, and also subscribe if you haven't already.